Welcome to Musical Minds and Missions, M Cubed. I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. M Cubed is brought to you by Phenotypic Recordings, a media company that brings to light new music by world-class musicians and innovative composers, with a focus on music that highlights the most important issues facing the world in our time. Today, I'm talking with pianist and composer Stephen Prutsman. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your wonderful score for Buster Keaton's Sherlock Jr. Just an incredible film, and the score you wrote is so, just matches the film so well. And I wonder if we could talk about, going back to the beginning, how you started working with scores for silent films.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, 9-year-old, going with my dad into Los Angeles. We lived about an hour and a half east in the Central California, and how we'd go to this film house, and I was just bedazzled by the experience of live music with a narrative that there's no words. It's just it's a silent film. And at the time, you could actually mail order little reels. I get, what do they call it? The teeny little reels that you had a little projector, and you could watch those silent films over and over again. And then fast forward maybe to about 25 years ago, and this opportunity with the St. Lawrence Quartet came up in Maine at a series there to score a silent film for me and the quartet to play along. I had done previously some jazz arrangements for piano quintet, and that, I think, was the impetus behind, well, what else can we do? And I jumped at that chance. So, and this was the first film that I scored. I asked, said what would be the best film of Buster Keaton to score, and this came up. It was perfect length, 45 minutes, and it's just perfect. I mean, it's perfect in every way. That's where it is, and then these types of projects rolled on with more and more opportunity to play them, and more interest in having new ones written. I also have had this long-standing relationship over many years, off and on, with the folks in St. Paul, Minnesota, the Schubert Club and Accordo, the band, and then the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And the Schubert Club really liked this, and so they committed to having a new program every year of live music with silent film.
Wonderful.
And that helped push things along. Anyway, it's I would say, that the Buster Keaton features, I've done about 4 or 5 of them. When I say I've done, I mean, I'm not done with them, but I have written scores for them, and that's kind of where I guess what I'm best at. I tried scoring some more dramatic features, and although I'm really proud of one of those called Sunrise, but the films are so good. The Buster Keaton films are so good, and you just always win with humor and music.
Yeah,
you can't go wrong. And they've taught me a lot about. It's interesting about what is humorous in music. How does abstract with no lyric, what does humor sound like?
Yeah, but also his genius and the dream sequence in the booth when he goes outside of his body, and then when the screen, changes, the scenes on the screen change, and he's always in a different place, and all these things that at the time, you think that was really, really, really progressive and kind of revolutionary for what he was doing. And amazing, the stunts, like when he broke his neck with the water tower and the water coming down, and then it was like 11 years later that he realized he had broken his neck. But I want to ask you about
Yes, I laugh because, immediately I think of this kiddo who, was touring with his parents at age 3. He be thrown around,
like a football. Yeah.
And I heard that there was some kind of like child protection agency in the state of New York or something looking into that because, he was called a human rag or something. And so when we think like Buster Keaton, breaking his neck literally on a stunt, I'm just like, the immediate reaction is he's been doing this his entire life and nothing bad had happened.
And his father is actually in the film, right? Joe Keaton at the beginning of the film.
Oh,
playing the butler, Anyway, but
right.
going back to being with your father in the theater, watching silent films. So those were the organist or the pianist was watching the film, responding, improvising, had some riffs that they used, but you've done something very different, which is that you have a pre-written score that you're with the film. So
right. Yeah, that's it's what did happen in a few great feature silent films where they would have an orchestra. A composer would score a piece, and that would be somehow, I don't know how they sync things up back then, but probably just by all visual cues, and maybe they had plenty of rehearsal. I don't know, but that's one way to go. The other way to go, and it's the same. I mean, just like in our tradition of music, it's written or it's oral tradition. Those are the two big buckets, and the great thing about what we realize is that when you get more than one player to improvise, it's really hard to, you'd have to do some serious planning because a 50-minute piece and just completely improvised, it won't, unless there's structure. Well, if it's improvised for 50 minutes, inherently there is no structure. If you start planning things out to go, then that goes down the rabbit hole, which in the end turns out to, just write everything out for everybody. And then, kind of like what a good musical theater show would happen. And then leave the opportunity for rewrites or add-ins or little hit points that somebody in the band thinks is funny. Go for it. That, allow for those little sprinkles of events that to happen. But the core is there, that there's always something to read and follow along with.
But then there are challenges because when you're playing music from a page, then it has to be really, really, I mean, you were talking about hitting those points.
You're right.
And it has to be sort of timed to the microsecond, right? Like you have to play it not exactly the same way each time, but with the same timing, right? So you're watching the screen. And when he does the cue on the pool, on the ball when there's the pool hall, the pool table scene, it has to be really, really exactly on the moment, right?
Well, in this phenotypic layout of where this rendering of Sherlock Jr. from Spoleto will reside in the vaults of Pheno films. For this, then we really, really make it accurate. What I've discovered over, I've probably played this particular silent film with different ensembles, I don't know, close to 100 times maybe in different over the years. And what I've discovered is that sometimes when it's not perfect, it's even funnier, so that's why with new ensembles always say wrong notes are welcome. It's part of the shtick. And we try to time things out. Nowadays, I always use a click track so that everybody knows where things are. And that's a lot easier, obviously, to sync up than to just have an infinite number of rehearsals looking at the screen trying to get it just right. When we talk about hit points, there are big hit points, that maybe linger on for a long period of time. Then there are others, like, as you said, like knocking a pole cue. There's a really distinct point there. So it's all good. I think the freedom of let's say an organist who has done a film has accompanied a film, many times, 20, 30 times. And so that organist really knows what's going on. There's going to be an inherent, improvement in the improvisation because she knows what works, what doesn't quite work. In fact, I heard a story that in the olden days, when the reels would be sent for the opening of a week run of a new silent film, like on a Wednesday or Monday, the reels would be sent. And then maybe the next day they open, right, with the organist seeing for the first time. And they said some cue sheet of ideas, to consider. The studio would say, like the death scene plays Chopin Funèbre, okay. It's these, maybe a little theme, bird theme or something that they could riff off of and so on. But the organist, no doubt, by the time Friday came along, really knew this movie, right? Having done it. So people would intentionally wait to buy tickets until that show, that they knew, okay, organist knows this is going to sound really good that night, rather than the first night. And she would have to, do a new one he would have to, every week. So it's not as if you really get a lot of lead time on these things. So there's advantages to both. In short, I think, obviously, in my case, if wanting to work with the string quartet, most of these scores are for piano quintet. It's not feasible. It's just not possible to have everybody improvise over 50 minutes and make it really work that you're happy with. So, I've done occasions where I've improvised on piano with something, and you can't really compare. Some things work, some things don't work. It's, maybe there's a moment, hey, that's kind of a good tune, whatever, or that was funny. But that's the whole purpose of, music of a written language, is because it's all just all the variables were so much to try to keep ingrained through an oral tradition. Writing started up. Hey, let's try to remember some of these great, little things that in the church that we could pass around, so we don't have to rely on memory,
Yeah.
So.
One thing I really love is that you pay tribute to the time period, and you have that sound of silent film scores with ragtime and swing and sort of that stride piano, but you also do this really interesting reference to the time period of, like you mentioned, working with the St. Lawrence Quartet on this, and you did this amazing uh, Wolfgang Eric Korngold. Is it Eric Wolfgang Eric Korngold piano quintet, and that where you include dissonance in this score, and that you don't shy away from some kind of modernist language in this score, but you also have this wonderful ragtime sound, which is hard to do as a pianist. And I'm working on a piece now that I'm going to perform, the Terry Riley Walrus. It's based on the Beatles song "I Am a Walrus," but it's like do. He says swing the eighth notes, and as classically trained pianists, that's hard to do, because as classically trained pianists, we go like da 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 da, like we're thinking, okay, do we count in thirds? Do we count in quarter notes? But it's really hard to get the feel, right? But you have experience with this, because I think early on in your career, early on in your life, you played jazz, you played with rock bands, you weren't only a classical pianist. So tell me about that, like just the sort of the feel, the ragtime feel that you have, that is not a kind of classical idiom.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I think back to my dad, who was an amateur singer, but loved all the old standards, and many, many hours were spent with him, telling me, learn this song, and he would sing the line, and I'd try to find appropriate harmonies underneath. I didn't have a fake book back then. and back then fake books were super expensive too. I remember that because they're illegal, but used to and then find the right harmonies. We'd have sometimes they'd be playing out on an LP, and that's good. That would be a easier way to try to find the right harmonies, get the feel, and go through all of these old standards, as a kid. And that that was the kind of the repertoire then for all the work, the piano bar work later on, right? So his generation was great, tunes of the 30s, 40s, pretty much. The earlier stuff, like the 20s, sometimes we'd he would want to share songs of his mother, like that his mother really loved, like a song called My Buddy from 1918 or something like that. Anyway, so that kind of got me engaged in all of that. Dad was also ragtime buff, loved playing ragtime. All kids love playing Joplin, I think. That's fun. Then got the job at the pizza parlor, and you could play ragtime piano at a pizza parlor in those days, and get paid for it. That was pretty good. So that's where the language kind of developed. Now the idea that, coming back to like humor in music, and very similar to the great scores of the old Looney Tunes cartoons, that something gnarly or uncomfortable might accompany the visual narrative of a similar thing, right? Or in humor, all of these, what is funny in music? Minor seconds are funny. Gotta say it. Minor seconds are funny, and that's always a good kind of riff on that. Also, little parody quotes are funny often. I always include a Schoenberg row in every Buster Keaton film I score and hide it, and usually it works well in sometimes harmonizing it can really work. Like this latest one I did, I thought, wow, this is a good tune when it's harmonized properly. Sometimes, like in Sherlock Jr., the row appears right when he goes outside. He looks in his manual and he says, "Step 1, follow your lead," or something like that. And at that moment, then the sheik comes out and starts walking, and then he's immediately behind him walking in tandem. And the row is, oh, I'll play it on the piano. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, that's from Schoenberg Opus 20.
Wow.
26. So, now, in the Sherlock version, it goes... that kind of sound. So, let's see, let's go.
That's very cleverly disguised, because it sounds certainly ominous. There's an ominous quality, but you don't notice that it's a tone row. That's really amazing.
Yeah, that's fun.
That.
So
I love that you're putting
I don't.
in,
That's a secret. Yeah. I don't share, and I'm always in the career of that piece. I've actually of 100 performances where I basically met every audience member afterwards, and on 2 occasions, someone asked me, "Did you use that?" They had heard that.
Wow.
And that one piece, and then there's a row in the piano concerto that I used for another piece. One guy heard that too.
That's
and
so
I'm like so impressed when people
yeah.
And certainly none of the players I've worked with ever recognized it.
That's really, really great. That's really great. You also use sort of leitmotifs, like with the young woman in the film who the Buster Keaton character is in love with. And he gives her a box of chocolates, and then the other guy gives her a box of chocolates. But So she's every time she appears, you have a sort of very romantic theme. Is that right?
Yeah, that's I call it the love theme. I try to find one in every story. The Buster Keaton melodramas, they all kind of have the same story. It's
Mm.
it's the hero who's a bit of an outsider,
Kind of scrawny.
socially
Yeah.
awkward, and he gets into some kind of dilemma or problem in order for him to fulfill his great wishes, which is love for a woman. Anyway, he gets entangled, usually by by a rival, the villain. And then somehow in the end, there's a chase where he actually exhibits some real incredible savant skills, and then saves the day and gets to be with the gal. So that what coming back to the love theme, we kind of that's always good to hear. Also, a kind of a little structural thing that I've gotten enamored with, it worked in this one certainly, is to have kind of a bit of an overture in the beginning, because like the opening bit can somehow try to include all of these different things that happen. If you can get a couple of them in there, that's an old school overture kind of approach to in musical theater. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. We went
I'd
all
like
over it.
maybe we can listen to some of the overture, because I think that's just such a beautifully composed piece of music. And as you say, it summarizes everything that we're going to hear. So let's listen
Yeah.
to a little bit of the overture. Steve, your score for the end of the film is really incredible because there's this long climax when he's chasing the villain and he finds the woman he loves in a shack, and there's a wonderful scene where the man who's captured her like unties his bow tie undoes his bow tie,
Oh,
and that means something really terrible, and she's sort of shrinking back in horror as he unties his bow tie, and she's like, no, no. And then Buster Keaton rescues her, but you have your score throughout has so much tension, and you're doing sort of tremolos in the bass in a wonderful nod to the old-fashioned soundtracks, where it's little, that rumble in the bass
diminished seven
of
chord. Yeah.
of having the tension build and build, and then at the very end, they're reunited. The dream sequence is over. He's reunited with the woman he loves in the booth of the film booth where
Right.
he has a job showing the film. And then she comes in. And what do you do then in terms of musically? What do you do then?
Yeah, it's the end. He's awakened from that long dream. By the end of the dream, the car has crashed into the water, and he's trying to swim, and he's been sleeping the whole time in the projection room. And then in real time, real life, the heroine comes in and apologizes, and and then he doesn't know what to do with himself. Basically, the genius of Buster Keaton I think has to do it in some way with his complete lack of affect in the face, right? You'll never see him smile. And it's just one expression. It's very similar to, almost, wonderful qualities my son exhibits my son on the spectrum big time. And just this idea that you don't show anything, and you have to and then he turns to the movie that's playing and is looking for cues, and just coincidentally at that moment there are two replicas of him and the girl. They're different people, but he's looking for a cue, and he needs to script, which a lot of people on the spectrum find in some way helpful in learning how to navigate awkward social circumstances by having a script. So he's looking at the movie for a cue, and then he sees a kiss, and then he tries to do a kiss, and then the ring and all of that stuff. It's just so endearing. Your heart just jumps out for this young man has an opportunity and wants to do the best he can and doesn't quite know the right way. So that's a nice, also I enjoyed in the old films. I mean, this is formulaic, I know, but the most sentimental moment of an old film with sound, I'm talking about maybe the films of the late 30s, you will hear a beautiful solo violin, very high in the register with a fast vibrato, almost as if it's a sound manifestation of a little tear coming out from the side of the face. There's an association, almost a trope, there, but it can be very endearing, and with other strings playing with, tremolo, mute, this kind of sense of pleading there. And so the love theme returns in that model to the end. And then of course he pulls in that wonderful punch at the very end of the movie of seeing himself in 10 years with babies screaming and everything, and he's like
and scratches his head.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not going to that. Yeah. What was it like doing this performance at the Spoleto Festival in Charleston?
Oh, look, oh my goodness. It's like the perfect place, Dock Street Theater in Charleston, to do it. We've worked out how to, get all the musicians on stage with the screen and everybody, synced up and stuff. But the players always are the top caliber, and the audiences love it. I always for this film do a little bit of a pre-talk right before we play, encouraging audience members to be vocal and to cheer and boo and hiss, just like in the olden days, to be comfortable with laughter, and so on. And the Charlestonians there and the surrounding communities come to nationwide. They come to Spoleto, all jump in right away. And the success of the kind of the experience of the music, the classic film, and the audience participating throws the dial off the odometer as to, what you get from it. Just a really rewarding experience that leaves you on a high. So yeah.
In your recording, when there are people, when he accomplishes some huge feat and then and then you hear, yay. Is that the audience or are those the musicians?
Oh, that's all audience. Yeah. We
Oh,
just have 5 musicians. So if you hear lots of hoopla going on, that's the audience that's captured in the live performance.
that's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
great. And there's one scene where are the musicians playing kazoos or singing?
Oh, that's right. They're playing kazoos. Yeah. Um, yeah. And it still gets a lot, 25 years ago with the St. Lawrence String Quartet playing kazoos in a piece that was kind of unusual. And but with everybody, it still gets kind of a laugh. So, what is that? What else is funny in music? Well, timbre is funny, right? Timbre can be funny, and
Yeah.
you know, you always see in the soundtrack of, let's say, a reality TV show that where there's a humorous moment, and you'll inevitably hear a synthetic, bassoon, boop, 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 something like that, or
Wow, wow, wow.
yeah, exactly. So the trick in silent film is you can't do the same gag twice, right? So if somebody falls, like the banana peel scene where he falls and one of the musicians has a little slide whistle. That's funny once, but you don't do it twice. It's like what maybe we should do it. That's one thing we learned over the years is less is best for a lot of those hit points. They used to call them monkey mouse moments or something. Basically, be monkey mouse for the basically what it's musical slapstick, kind of. So,
but violinists or string players can do a lot of funny things, like the boink sound with the sort
right,
of plucked string. You pluck the string hard and it goes boink.
right,
And
yeah.
that you use that, or the sort of the sort of microtone, like, "Meow," and you do that in the film too. I mean,
You're making me laugh, Sarah. Like,
but there are things that the strings can do that piano can't do.
well, no, actually, I mean, we both got stuff in our, kit. But what's interesting to me, and you've had this experience too. All chamber musicians have this idea of being silly, in having an opportunity to publicly be silly and get a laugh. We're all up for that. If we get permission from the page to do that, and then to try to make it work as a theatrical performer, because we are theatrical performers. People look at us when we play. So it's amazing to me to get a 45-year-old seasoned chamber musician who's coming to a festival and we're playing this thing, and then it says, like, do a ding, what you're saying, a boing, when he gives her the little baby ring, and I tell you, this Juilliard trained great artist, chamber musician will play Bach, Beethoven 132, whatever. He'll work for hours. Is that funny? And each time the band will laugh, even when he. So what is that? It's just being, being like kids, and we're just all of our colleagues. It's such a wonderful opportunity to have, and I wish other professions had this chance. Neurosurgeons get together and play in the sandbox or something.
Yeah, so important. When you said you've done this about 100 times, so you've done it with different string quartets.
Yeah.
But but not all string quartets are comfortable. I
Oh,
mean, classically trained
yeah.
string quartets aren't always comfortable with dancehall or ragtime or swinging the beat or
Right.
whatever, like doing the quotes from popular music.
Yeah, it's the first order of business is, I think, in these scenarios, I have not had much luck with actually writing out, like, some folks try with through composed music for people, improvise on these 3 pitches, you know, or make bizarre sounds for 15 seconds, whatever. That sometimes composers throw in there, and it always sounds bad. I mean, it's like, you know, it never quite works. So the first order of business with this stuff is to write everything out. I mean, everything has to be written out. There cannot be any, even to the degree that sometimes I'd rather put it in six. If you have the swing, da 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 da, you know, put it in six. Don't put it in duplets and then write swing above. You know, that's even just that little help. Does that make sense? Oftentimes, you know, they say you put it in duplets, so it'd be written da 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 da, ba 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 ba, and then you just put swing, which a jazzer would know immediately what that is, but the classical would say, okay, da 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 da, you know, they'll get confused. Whereas if you put it in six, ba da, you know, or you know, like ba da 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 ba da 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 dum bum ba da 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 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. That works. So that's a little thing. The usually that here again in comedies, what if, you know, we have a quartet of people who you know, are classically trained, and 3 of them get it, and the cellist does not, you know, grew up in a culture maybe where it was not, you know, accessible to swing or jazz or something like that, or just never was interested, and he's trying to do it. Even that can be funny, you know. I mean, I was saying sometimes the offset of the main thing is that the players have fun with it, and then it's inevitably a success. The other side is that if it is with, you know, a lot of quartets have done this, they're not going to jump into something that they would potentially look bad at, you know. And I think of all the types of classical musician ensemble soloists out there, string quartets are the most honest with themselves, you know, when it comes to music.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. Do they have to watch the film? Do they have to be watching the film, or are you sort of watching the film as you play?
No, usually, you know, that's a funny thing, because sometimes, like it's St. Paul, because we put things together there rather quickly. And what I do try to do is give the players a MIDI version of the score and marry it to the film, so they can get a sense of it. Often they won't bother to sit down and watch it, even though I tell them it'd be fun. You can do it in bed, you know.
Yeah.
But they, you know, they before the first rehearsal, they might not have seen it. And I've had players who just play through with the MIDI track, with just more of a basic idea, but don't really know how the music and the video are going to go. You know, most of the time they check out a past performance with live music that I have, something like that. But they get a sense of it, you know, of the swing.
What is the process for you of writing? Do you watch the film and sit at the piano and sort of make sketches? Or do you watch a scene over and over and think about what's best for that scene? What is your process
Well,
in composing?
yeah, I'm more and more when I come to, you know, I'm intrigued with, I firmly believe that all music, that I'm not, you know, again, just all instrumental music has an inherited, or not inherited, has a narrative, basically, that it's everything that, that's what music is. You know, there's something inside of intervals that relates one to another. That's what music is. And it's just such a great opportunity when you see a silent film narrative going from beginning to end. You get the sense of what the storyline is doing, and you have the opportunity to write an equivalent in this language that we've set out for ourselves, this music thing. And what does that sound like? Usually in a narrative, that's why I like have the leitmotifs, and then the structure's often laid out, as I said before. And so you wait and think about, hey, what would make a good opening theme, a love theme, what chase theme, all of these kind of things that start, and then just gather a bunch of little pieces of paper where scribble, scrabble all over the place. I have a whole box of unused stuff that you just throw in. That I heard that Duke Ellington called it the stock. That's what he would do, and so it was like, I gotta try that. That sounds, rather than feel like you have to like do something with everything, every inspiration that might come along. Don't burn it, but just put it in an old box and see what happens. And so the ideas are infinite. They're out there, all sorts of fun things. My tendency now is try to just be a little bit more careful with how many little gags I throw in. I think it's another funny thing about music in these things is to actually throw in all of a sudden a contemporary quote, that doesn't quite fit the time period. That's kind of fun to do, but I want to be really careful that doesn't in any way kind of like take over what's going on the screen.
No, it's wonderful that you sort of look backwards and forwards, and Schoenberg being, that you include a Schoenberg tone row that's sort of contemporary with the film in a way.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I although I don't know how those two might have intersected, Buster and Arnold, but I throw in what's I think is really funny, and I would say 8 times out of 10, maybe somebody else gets it, and it's like, Stephen Sondheim said, musical theater is never written, it's always rewritten. It's kind of like that's part of the joy too, is that uncovering new stuff and throwing out stuff that didn't really work.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to M Cubed from Phenotypic Recordings, co-founded by Michael Hostetler and Stephen Prutsman. The music you heard on today's show is available on Bandcamp and wherever music is streamed. There are links in the show notes. Today's program was produced by AJ Machado, and I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. Please follow or subscribe so you know whenever we post a new show.